Today on CityCast Salt Lake, people gathered to debate the city's 999 bike ride on Monday night. We report out on a thoughtful discussion, plus some reporting about a kind of shocking number of ICE arrests in southern Utah. And then we've got a special segment just for our members. We share the top 3 things you must do before summer ends. I'm host Ali Vallarta. I'm here with newsletter editor Terina Ria.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. And CityCast Salt Lake contributor Andy Larsen.
Good morning, Ali.
Hi, Andy. Okay, let's talk about the 999. I'm going to give a little background here. So I actually remember when I moved to Salt Lake City, I rode in the 999 bike ride, and I thought it was so magical. It was like one of the reasons I wanted to move here. So what happens is on Thursday nights at 9 p.m., people meet en masse at 9th and 9th at the dry cleaners and go for this like kind of chaotic, we'll see where it takes us, there's no real route planned bike ride. You may have heard this referred to as critical mass in other cities. Like there are so many bikers that you can kind of strong arm the traffic pattern because you rule the road on your 2 wheels. And something that happened this summer is that the Salt Lake City Police Department started to show up. I think this was mid-June when this started to, there was a shift. There was a paradigm shift. Police officers started to show up at these rides. We know from some reporting in City Weekly that they were using drones to like monitor the ride. There were anywhere from like 20 to close to 40 police officers responsible for keeping eyes on this bike ride on any given Thursday night. And that had, of course, like a chilling effect on this very joyful experience. So on Monday night, Unplugged Wellness, Lucas, listener pod, friend of the pod, he put together this like what I think is really cool, a conversation between stakeholders. There was someone from the police department, someone from the city's transportation department, someone from the 999. And he moderated a conversation about this ride. Like, where do we go from here, right? And you went, Terina.
I did. And I think this was like one of like the first discussions of this kind around the 999 ride. So I think it felt very productive. I think the vibes overall were pretty chill, pretty collaborative. Although at one point, someone in the audience called Jeff, who was up there representing the 999. If you've been to the 99 ride, you know Jeff. He's the guy with the speaker. He's leading the music. But somebody called him a bootlicker when he suggested that a police presence could make the ride safer. And Jeff said, I don't know what that means. That's all he said. And then we kind of moved on. So that kind of gives you an idea of like the underlying tension there. Obviously, the deputy police chief was in the room. He had, his fellow officers were sitting in the back row. So we have that tension there. But overall, everyone in the room seemed to agree that the 999 is an important part of Salt Lake's culture. Just like you said, Ali, like it makes you want to, it's an exciting, part of our community, this gathering that we all, it's just fun. We just need a fun gathering and this kind of uplifts bike culture as well. City Council member Erica Carlson was also there, called it a critical third space. And, the police chief, Bill Manzanares, he did state very clearly that the police department is not looking to stop the 999. He wanted to make that clear. So I think that the disagreement was really about what happens when a spontaneous leaderless bike ride becomes an event with like hundreds and hundreds of people. Like, how do we keep people safe? And police, they said that they want people to obey the traffic laws. But then they also said that they don't have the resources to pull officers away from other parts of the city every single Thursday night. And then transportation official Kyle Irvin was there. He talked about like solutions that he was thinking could be a good idea, like a published bike route, volunteers helping direct riders and direct traffic, just like better communication overall. But then riders kind of pointed out that like stopping hundreds of cyclists at every single red light can actually create its own safety problem because there's safety in numbers. And this is kind of a part of the ethos of 999. And a part of that is like, there is no organizer or person. It is just like this collective, moving together. So there's no leader. So it's hard to organize it all. And it's really the question that came out of it was like, can the city figure out how to support this huge leaderless weekly bike ride? Like, and what would a city sanctioned ride even look like, you know?
Yeah. Have you ridden in the 999, Andy Larsen?
No, I haven't, which is kind of a regret of mine because obviously, I see it pass all the time and it seems like so much fun, but no, I never have. And like, that's kind of my question is out of all of the, there are clear points of conflict here, right? Like in order to allow the 999 to run, the city needs them to follow stoplights. It's not going to happen, like they're not going to stop at stoplights or stop signs. And I think the published route thing, I think will also be extremely controversial. So like, given that, did the police seem like they were going to allow that to occur, or does it seem like there's going to continue to be conflict in this ride moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, all love to everyone with planner instincts. I have them too. But if I think about even like the Salt Lake City Marathon, that is a published route. That route is published for months before it happens. And you will catch half this town stuck at an intersection they can't cross being like, damn it. There's to think that like week to week people will just look for this information is like, I think it just seems really unlikely. And the thing about the 999 that I feel like, we can't forget is that this is a protest. Like it is sort of fundamentally has the instinct of a protest. Critical mass rides are meant to be a protest. Not obeying traffic laws is kind of the point. Bikes taking over the road is kind of the point. The message is, like you said, Terina, safety in numbers. Like, we finally feel safe on the road because there's a critical mass of us. Whereas we know that like the fatalities, the unsafeness for not just bikers, but pedestrians in our city right now, those numbers are bad. That's why the city has a whole Vision Zero strategy they're trying to implement to make the roads safer. So this is a tough one.
I know.
This is a tough one.
That you mentioned like protest, that's something that Erica Carlson, one of her ideas as a solution is like, she mentioned like a protest and how people communicate through protests is like, they kind of telephone it. So like if they need to communicate to the people in the back, they're bringing that back. They're communicating to each other like throughout that. And she's like, maybe we can bring that to the ride. Like if we say we need to stop at this light, or like something is ahead, we need to stop here or something, and just like travel that back. Maybe that's a solution.
A little bit of that does happen, I will say. Like there is a bit of like, I don't know, I used to ride in fox hunts, which is very silly, but it's the like tally ho, tally ho, tally ho. Like there is a little bit of that energy on the ride.
That's great.
But I think like, I mean, I was kind of shocked to go back and reread in City Weekly, Ben Wood's reporting on the number of officers that were pulled into monitoring this ride, like, upwards of 20. That is a lot of people. And also like, these officers are showing up, they're in full gear. That means they have weapons. Weapons make people feel unsafe. Like, I think there's also, is there a world where if you want to have, quote unquote, peace officers at this ride, do they need to be carrying guns?
Well, yeah, that's something that was brought up as well last night, is that like they were like so aggressive the way that they showed up, just like being in cars and motorcycles at a bike ride. Like you don't need to show up that way. Like if there is a presence there, can we just have the officers on bikes with us? So they can be still monitoring, doing what they're going to do anyway. But do they need to be doing that in vehicles and chasing people down?
Were police responsive to that idea?
They were. I was surprised with the police deputy and how responsive he was. He was very open to hearing people out. And he's like, I'm open to having any conversation about how we make this safer for everybody. So I hope that the conversations continue. And he said that he's talked to Mayor Mendenhall, and she is also a fan of 999 and wants to keep it going. But, she also is public safety number one is her thing. So,
yeah. Can we just like, we're talking about police being called to the scene, this sort of like paradigm shift in the ride. I think we should talk about why that happened. Like, did that come up in this conversation, Terina? Like, why all of a sudden there needed to be a police presence at this ride? Because it's been going on for more than a decade.
I think because all of the complaints, and he said he knows that overall, like, people are just having a good time. It's like people are bringing their families to this event. And he said that his team knows that it's a very small amount of people who are ruining it for everybody and like, vandalizing and littering and, doing all that stuff. And so that's the reason why that they were called in, basically because of all the complaints, he said.
Mm. So vandalizing and littering. Yeah. I'm thinking a lot lately I was in this conversation recently about safety in public parks, and it was so interesting. Dr. Jeff Rose was there, and he studies homelessness in our parks and things like that. And I don't want to like conflate too much, but I think when we think about safety, there is a difference between whether or not you perceive that you're unsafe or are unsafe, right? Mm-hmm. And like sometimes I think we call in things like vandalizing, littering, we see mess, we see chaos, and we like perceive unsafeness. But by my knowledge, like there's only one person in recent memory that's ever been like truly harmed by the 999. And that was actually a rider who was crossing a track and was hit by a train.
Yeah.
So
that's something that an audience member pointed out, because he was like, well, the 999 is being called lawless when it's like, it's actually the cars out there that are like putting us in danger and like aren't called lawless and aren't being, controlled by the police. And of course, the police had pushback to be like, well, if they're blocking intersections, cars are going to get, tickets too.
Totally.
It's just like riders versus drivers that came up a lot.
Yeah.
There probably is more room for the 999 to be self-policing a little bit with regards to the vandalizing and the littering, right? Like, I think those are kind of the remnants of the ride that like show up the next morning or, and are annoying. And mm-hmm. you can understand why like the community doesn't want that. And I think, if the leaders of this ride, to the extent that they exist, like can do probably more like, prevent that from happening, right? To be like, mm-hmm. hey, we can't have, as you pointed out, some like bad eggs ruining kind of a good time for everybody. Mm. But then, I also think that like kind of police intervention and 20 plus officers and all that kind of stuff, that's the kind of thing that can become, really negative and really problematic. And I think, mm-hmm. The police can hopefully work with these kind of leaders in conversations like these in order to like make it so it is self-policing rather than like SLCPD, which apparently they say they have issues with. They can't put this many staff on it, but they put 20 people out there. Mm-hmm. To make it a better ride in kind of a more organic way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They talked about that just being like a culture shift. Like, it's just like, can we like be like, guys, be cool. Don't like throw your cans on the ground, pick mm-hmm. up after yourself. Mm-hmm. That could be like the culture shift, and eventually won't need any police there.
Yeah. The thing that like this all comes back to that I think makes it a unique challenge is that it's a leaderless event, right? And I think if Jeff were with us now, Jeff would be like, whoa, I'm not the leader of the 999.
He said that all night.
Oh, I'm sure he did. He's like, you recognize me. I'm a familiar face. I'm a regular, but like this ride has no leadership, and that is sort of by design. And so there isn't a top-down structure. There isn't someone that can go and distribute like a 999 Bill of Rights and say, hey, these are the rules now, Mm-hmm. So,
and nobody wants to take that on because then there's liability.
Oh, yeah.
Totally.
Because if anything happens, it's on you. And so that's kind of what brought it back to like, can the city, sanction this in a way that it still feels like it preserves the 999 spirit mm-hmm. and not be, so tightly wound, but can still be like a fun event, safe event for everyone.
I am pessimistic about that. Frankly, Andy. As soon as it becomes city sanctioned and city run and city organized, like then it's significantly less cool. And, I do think that matters. And mm-hmm. anyway.
And less of a protest.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Terina, thanks for spending your Monday night at this cool event and getting the scoop for us, for everyone who couldn't make it.
The
end of summer is near, and Salt Lake Society is soaking up every last drop with their annual swim party. Join Society on Monday, August 24th from 6 to 8 p.m. for an evening of barbecue, swimming, and socializing. You may even see some handmade sundresses and swimsuits at this party. Tickets are just $10, and this event is 21 up. Society's ever-changing fabric selection is also starting to look like fall. Stop by their brick and mortar for the last bits of linen, seersucker, and gauze as they start bringing in flannels, corduroys, and other cozy favorites. Get tickets to Society's swim party at saltlakesociety.com or stop by their beautiful brick and mortar in the Granary District to check out new fabrics every week. saltlakesociety.com. Newsletter editor Terina Ria, CityCast Salt Lake contributor Andy Larsen. Andy, we want to talk about some reporting that you did this week in your employer, the Salt Lake Tribune. Maybe you've heard of her. About ICE arrests, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, quadrupling in Southwest Utah under the Trump administration, and the fact that most of these arrestees have no criminal convictions. What did you find when you looked into this?
Yeah, this is a story we've been working on for months and months now. I mean, I first got kind of my hands on this data in May. It's a co-project with me and Brooke Larsen, no relation, but she's our Southern Utah reporter at the Tribune. Basically, we wanted to look at, we had heard from members of community down there that ICE, despite, kind of saying, hey, they were going after the worst of the worst, and that's something that Tom Homan has said as well in kind of the wake of the Minnesota stuff,
Sure.
that they would be doing kind of targeted operations, right? Like they would be going after criminals, they would be going after people with felonies, they would be going after public safety threats in order to, improve communities and kind of leave families alone to some degree. So we wanted to look at the data to make sure that that was true. And in fact, it is not true. So, for example, in the Biden administration versus the Trump administration, there have been 10 arrests per month in the Biden administration from this ICE St. George office, which kind of covers the region, 48 arrests per month in the Trump administration. So more than quadrupling this number of arrests. And indeed, there have been even more arrests since kind of this targeted operations pledge was made, since Washington County Sheriff's Office started working with the St. George ICE office. So already we see like, hey, there's this big jump in arrests, and this kind of change in behavior that they say is going to be happening has not really happened.
I just want to quickly clarify, worst of the worst, that is a quote. That is a phrase used by the White House border czar, Tom Homan. That's not an Andy Larsen
Correct.
quote.
Yeah, that's a
Tom Homan quote.
That's a quote, and you'll see them use that kind of often. So like Department of Homeland Security has a quote unquote worst of the worst website where they put on various criminals that they have arrested and deported as kind of like a reverse wanted sheet, if you will. It's guys we already got.
Do you know what's ironic is that, the former Washington County Sheriff, Nate Brooksby, he also used this term, we're going after worst of the worst. He just resigned in March after allegations of sexual harassment and interfering in an investigation.
Wow. The call's coming from inside the house, dude.
Exactly. Yeah, not surprising.
The other thing I'll say is you want to look at like the share of these people who are being arrested and deported for criminal convictions, right? Like to what degree do they have criminal convictions on the record? And, are these truly the worst of the worst, or are these just people and families? And in fact, we spoke with one. His name was
Criminals,
Hippolito.
of course, also being people and families.
Yeah. Great point. But anyway, so 83% of ICE arrestees had convicted criminal records in the Biden administration. That percent fell to 44% during the Trump administration. So again, you're getting a lot of people with misdemeanors. You're getting a lot of people with no obvious criminal record in their histories, other than the fact that they had overstayed their visas or whatever immigration issue caused them to be deported or arrested and deported.
Well, I'm actually not surprised by these numbers, Andy. I think it matches like the national data that they have, according to Track Immigration. Like 70% of detainees have no criminal convictions. And that's out of like 65,000 detainees or something. So it just is like, we keep getting this rhetoric of like, no, we're getting the criminals only, like, don't worry. But it's like, that's not what the data is showing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there are a lot of people who support a larger immigration enforcement strategy, but, you know, the devil is in the details and in who you're doing this and where and how to. And I think one of the things that we've found in talking to people about this and talking to the community in St. George is most people don't want it this way, where it is kind of, again, going after people who are working, who are contributing into the community in some way, to then just be deported because they've overstayed an H-2A visa. It's difficult. I get that it's a difficult problem, but the Trump administration and officials down in Washington County have kind of misrepresented what they've done here. And that's troubling from my point of view.
Yeah. I mean, I have such complicated feelings about criminal justice in and of itself. Like, I'm like, okay, you know what's a felony? Harassing Bigfoot in the state of Washington. Like, I don't know. Like, there's also just this idea of like, if people live in our communities and they make bad choices, I think it's an opportunity for our community to help them make better choices in the future. And like, the way to do that is not to deport people or send them back into potentially a more dangerous situation or a situation that's more destabilizing. But I'm curious, Andy, like, how does this data compare to what we're seeing, for example, in Salt Lake City or in other major cities? Like,
yeah, we plan to kind of expand this approach to Salt Lake City and elsewhere moving forward. So I don't have like Salt Lake City specific numbers. We did model this kind of data direction over a study that had been done in Las Vegas, where they've seen substantially similar things to what we found in St. George and Southern Utah. So we know at least that is there. We're also kind of reliant on difficult data sources on this. So probably the best data source for this is from the Deportation Data Project, which is a project out of UC Berkeley that Freedom of Information Act requests all this public record data for all these people who have been arrested and deported to kind of learn about their criminal records and, you know, whether or not they had suspected gang affiliation and so on and so forth. 98% of them, by the way, in our study did not have suspected gang affiliation. But that data has most recently been updated in March. So it takes a long time for kind of the records and the court filings to filter its way down to the public. And ICE isn't releasing any of this data on their own. So, you know, it takes some time to figure kind of this out and move forward.
Yeah.
But also they make everything so difficult, like renewing your visa. And they put so many like hoops that you have to jump. And like, I remember that story not too long ago, like with the immigration cases, like they were moving them up without really notifying people. And so then if they missed their appointment, then they would be in trouble for that. And then they would, you know, it just is like, it's a lose-lose.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw something recently that I thought was really interesting, Andy, and I actually thought of you when it comes to your dating reporting around immigration and customs enforcement. So maybe you saw this. This was reporting in the Associated Press that Immigration and Customs Enforcement basically has this plan to get liability insurance that would be subsidized by the department, therefore like taxpayers, for state and local officers who have been deputized to enforce federal immigration laws. And like on its face, that's kind of distressing that we would be paying for liability insurance for these officers in case they behave badly on duty, right? But there is maybe this other side of it, which would increase the paper trail. If you're like filing an insurance request, if you are like, that's like more papers, and that's more of a paper trail that's outside of the federal government. So in some ways that could actually make getting information about officer behavior, about what cities and counties have 287G agreements, et cetera, a little bit easier. And I'll be curious to see if this plan goes into place and if that bears out.
I'll also say I would rather have the federal government take on that burden than like it being kind of split up in these kind of smaller cities and jurisdictions, right? You know, the city is normally the one that would pay the millions of dollars in the legal outcome of that proceeding, right? Like, and that can be hugely damaging for like a municipal budget when compared to the federal government's budget, right? So like,
Right.
and you know, obviously you would like to have the city have oversight over its officers, but I don't know that we want like St. George as a city to be ruined either. Like, it is a complicated issue. Anyway, I had heard that, and it will be interesting to see if that leads to a greater paper trail. I'll say that ICE has been so unresponsive with their records to this point. I mean, the Washington County Sheriff's Office stopped kind of responding to a lot of our requests, despite, you know, the Utah law saying that they should give us this data. They ended that early this year. So like it's a frustrating state of affairs for sure.
Yeah. Newsletter editor Terina Ria and CityCast Salt Lake contributor Andy Larsen, we are going to pivot to a joyful segment that is, I got to tell you, just for our members. But fear not, if you are not a CityCast Salt Lake neighbor, you can become a member right now at membership.citycast.fm. We're talking about the top 3 things you must do before summer ends. I think this recent rain and, dare I say, hail has put us in a fall mood, but not yet. We still have more summer, and so we're going to make the most of it. This is basically a huge thank you to folks in our membership program. We could not make our show and our newsletter without you. They come forward with $10 a month or $100 a year. And in exchange, we try and shower them with as many perks as possible, like a special segment like this one. So if you are a neighbor, stick around for this members only segment. If you're not, you'll head out now, or you can become a neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. All right. Newsletter editor Terina Ria and CityCast Salt Lake contributor and Salt Lake Tribune reporter Andy Larsen. It was really fun to spend this morning with you. Take good care.
Will do. Thanks, Ali.
You too.
You can support this show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Salt Lake neighbor. Right now, we're doing a closet clean out. I forgot to mention that. If you become a member now, we'll hook you up with a mug, a Oxford pennant, or a beautiful tote bag. Visit membership.citycast.fm to join. That's all for us today. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around town. Be good.